The Far Quest, The Chronicles of Cursoon, Book 1, by R. Jason Lynch, copyright 2016, EMP 2023, all rights reserved. Chapter 27, Lakewood's End. After a slow turn of its brass knob, the iron-banded door opened upon its rusted hinges with a metallic groan. The newly made crack sent a long streak of light across the dusty stone floor within the pitch black of the room beyond. With a slight hesitation, Cursoon cautiously peeked around the heavy door and peered into the darkness. A dank, musty smell came to his nose as he gazed blindly while waiting for his eyes to adjust. Tippleglee, on the other hand, stomped over to one of the columns within the great hall and took a torch from the rack where it hung. Quickly lighting it, the gnome returned to the half-open door, ready to venture into the darkness. Cursoon nodded and followed the little man's example. After he had retrieved one as well, Tippleglee held his torch to the bards, lighting it. With these flaming torches in their hands, Cursoon shoved the door the rest of the way open, and the two searchers went forward into the deep shadows. As they went, they lit any torch or candle they found so that they dispelled the darkness one room at a time. Thus, they soon found a wide stone staircase directly ahead of them, and on the left, a short hallway lined with doors. Inspecting the hall of doors first, they opened only one, and inside, they discovered a tiny windowless room.
"These must be the servants' quarters,"
Cursoon remarked, as he glanced inside the nearly empty room. There was little more than a narrow bed and a chest at its foot. Leaving the rest of these small rooms unsearched, they turned to the right side of the wide staircase. Here, they found a large kitchen just beyond an arched doorway, and at the far end of the kitchen, there was another stone staircase leading down into deeper darkness. Descending these stairs, they discovered the castle's storeroom, and its many shelves held jars of dried and pickled food. On the right side of the larder, there were more stairs, and these led to a wine cellar, but its treasures lay just beyond a locked iron-banded door. Cursoon peered through the door's barred window for a long moment, but Tippleglee was far too short to look for himself.
"Well,"
the grumpy gnome growled,
"don't just leave a man to wonder. What do you see?"
"Would you like me to hoist you up to the window?"
the bard asked playfully.
"Lay a hand on me, and you'll not use it again any time soon."
Tippleglee growled angrily. Cursoon laughed and then gestured for the smaller man to calm down. Looking back through the window, he squinted his blue eyes.
"It's too dark to see much, but I can see light dancing on water. The cellar must be flooded. I can also see a great many things afloat. Oh, some look like large casts."
"Casts?"
Tippleglee echoed while licking his parched lips with anticipation. Turning away from the wine cellar's door, they found another, and it was locked as well. However, this door had a sliding shutter over its small window, and when Cursoon slid the window open, light suddenly shone into his face. Blinking blindly, he slowly perceived a large, flooded dungeon. Unlike most castles' prisons, there was a huge arched entryway in one wall secured with a portcullis, and shafts of sunlight easily streamed through its lattice of metal bars and danced upon the water. By this light, he could clearly see rusty chains with their shackles and fetters hanging empty upon the walls. One set of these tools of imprisonment seemed overly large to Cursoon. Finding nothing more, the two searchers returned to the wide stone staircase, and after climbing them, they found a large chamber just beyond another set of iron-banded doors. This was clearly a council room, for in the middle of this chamber there was a long oaken table, and 7 finely made chairs were set around it, but the chair at the head of the table was larger than the others. All around this room, 12 large arched windows were spaced out evenly, with one on either side of the door. 8 set in the walls on the right and left, and 2 on the opposite end of the room. The leaded glass in these windows was divided and stained with the same emblems that were painted upon the shield: the blue field with a golden chevron and 3 golden shamrocks, 2 above, and one below. Cure soon went to one of the windows.
There's no doubt now,
He mumbled, as he traced a shamrock with an outstretched finger.
my grandfather must have been from this place.
The gnome gave him a side glance, but making no reply, he only clamped his teeth upon the stem of his pipe. On the far side of the room, they came to another staircase. This rectangular stair spiraled upward and downward around a square column of stone. Descending the stairs, they discovered a treasure room with several iron-banded chests. These were either all locked or they stood open and empty. There were a few sets of armor, several swords, maces, and more round shields hanging upon the 4 windowless walls. These also bore Cursoon's family's coat of arms.
Do you think my grandfather's father was a guard?
The bard asked as he took up a sword and inspected its craftsmanship.
I do wonder why all these things were simply abandoned.
As before, Tippleglee gave no answer, but his mood seemed to darken further. Climbing back up the stairs and passing the council chamber, they came to a smaller room on the next floor. It was clearly the Lord's parlor, and in it there was a large fireplace, several comfortably cushioned couches, and a small table with silver cups and a matching teapot. There were 4 large arched windows spaced out evenly around the room, one on either side of the staircase, one on the right wall, and one on the left wall. The leaded glass in these windows was divided and stained with the same emblems that were painted upon the shield and upon the other windows. Again, Cursoon paused and eyed the stained glass thoughtfully, while Tippleglee moved to the next door at the other end of the parlor. Beyond it, they found a short hallway that was lined with 5 arched doors. Behind 3, there were goodly-sized bedchambers, and each had a large bed and a window that matched those in the parlor and the council room. However, behind the 4th door, they found a comfortable study. Its walls were lined with shelves which held a few dusty old books and a great number of scrolls. These shelves were only interrupted by a small writing desk. In front of the desk, there was another arched window that matched all the others. Cursoon went to one of the shelves and took a scroll. After blowing away the dust that covered it, he unrolled the scroll and studied what was written within.
It's a tally scroll,
He remarked, and then with eager curiosity, he read the words aloud.
required for the midwinter's feast. 700 holy candles from Ataraxia, a troop of minstrels from Gala, 24 casks of wine from Goldenvale.
Tippleglee's bushy eyebrows lifted with sudden interest.
It could be that those you spied bobbing in the cellar are left over from just such a feast.
After a quick nod of agreement, Cursoon continued reading the list.
6 roasted pigs, 12 roasted geese, 24 wheels of cheese, assorted, 100 loaves of bread, 30 sacks of grain, 12 jars of butter, 30 bushels of apples, and a new chain for my lord's most honoured guest.
Cursoon frowned.
It's signed by order of the Steward of Cloverdale.
The bard scratched his beard with a thoughtful look.
I suppose Lakewood was once called Cloverdale, but that name doesn't really fit this place.
He remarked with a shrug, and then put the scroll back upon the shelf. Next, the 2 searchers left the study and turned toward the last door at the end of the short hall. Behind this larger 5th door, they found what had to be the Lord's bedchamber. Though the room was also covered in dust and cobwebs, it was lavishly equipped with a huge bed replete with thick blankets and comfortable pillows. There was also a small fireplace, a tall oaken wardrobe, a full-length mirror built into the wardrobe's door. Several tapestries were hanging upon the walls. There was a comfortable-looking armchair and 4 windows that matched all the others. One of these windows was actually a set of doors, and when the bard opened them, he found a small balcony that looked out over the courtyard. Turning back to the room, Cursoon gazed at the huge bed yearningly. It had been far too long since he had slept in a proper bed instead of upon the hard ground. He ached to rest in such comfort, but he knew he must continue his search. They went back to the staircase in the parlor and climbed still further up. Thus, they soon found themselves upon the crenellated battlements of the keep's roof. Though it was high upon the rooftop, the area was clearly designed to be a small garden for the lord and his family's private pleasure. There was a square of lush green grass in the middle of the roof, and around this there were 12 square flower beds, 3 on each side. A table with its matching chairs were arranged in the center of this patch of grass. Walking across the thick living carpet of the lawn, they came to a turret that rose up from one corner of the keep's roof. Inside its arched doorway, they found yet another stair that continued upward within the small square tower. The two men climbed to the uttermost top of the keep and surveyed all the land below them. Mostly, they saw nothing but treetops, for the tower stood only slightly taller than the forested lake that surrounded the castle. To them, it felt as though they were in their boat again amid a lake of leaves. However, this lake of leaves was really more like a great bowl, and around the living forest of Lakewood, the dead trees of Meyermerk stood like a dense, impenetrable wall.
Look!
Cursoon exclaimed with a hint of wonder.
You can see how the dead swamp encircles us on all sides except that small gap in the southwest. And see here.
He pointed downward nearer to the tower where they stood.
There's a narrow line of wall extending from the inner courtyard, past the outer wall, and through the forest to that very place.
Tippleglee's greenish-hazel eyes glanced nervously over the parapets that ringed the top of the tower like a square crown. He did not seem to notice anything that the bard pointed at.
Haven't you seen enough?
The little old man grumbled.
We gnomes love the sturdiness of the earth, and that's just where I mean to return my feet.
Cursoon nodded.
Let's see where that line of wall goes.
With no argument from Tippleglee, they made their way back down the stairs. Cursoon hurried with eager anticipation, while the grumpy gnome gladly followed close behind. Thus, they were soon back out into the inner courtyard. Strolling down the covered walkway that lined the west side of the ward, Cursoon muttered to himself,
There should be a postern gate here somewhere.
Pausing at the end of the cloister, he approached the wall and peered through the thick vines of ivy that grew there. Moving these aside, the bard uncovered a small iron-banded door.
Here it is!
He exclaimed. After lifting the latch and finding that the door would not budge, Cursoon was forced to set his shoulder against the thick oaken boards, and with a strained grunt, he pushed with all his might. The door opened haltingly, producing a deep, stuttering metallic groan. Beyond the postern, they found the ramparts of the long wall that stretched out before them. As they went along the top of this wall, Cursoon peered over the edge and realized that it was actually a long stone walkway. This way was constructed by linking many arched bridges, which spanned from one stone base to the next as they made their way through the flooded forest. After a quarter of a mile, the line of arches ended at a square watchtower. Entering the short tower and climbing its stairs, they soon came to its battlements. Cursoon leaned out over the tower's low stone wall and exclaimed with a grin,
So, here ends the forest of Meyermerk.
Not only the wall and the wood, but even the land itself ended, for all around the watchtower, the lake spilled over the edge of a semicircle of cliffs in 7 large and beautiful waterfalls. Moreover, the tower stood perched upon an outcrop of natural rock, and so looked as though it hovered over the crescent-shaped precipice.
I thought it was Lakewood you meant to name this part,
the old gnome remarked grumpily as he eyed the sea that stretched out to the horizon.
Right you are, Mr. Tippleglee. Right you are.
Cursoon replied with a happy laugh. As they stood gazing at the water falling into the bay below, Cursoon marveled at how quiet it seemed to be from where they stood. It only sounded like very distant rumbling thunder. As the two men looked out over the edge, they noticed, off to their right, that the sun was beginning to set in the west. Cursoon turned to his grumpy companion and asked with a grin,
Shall we see if those back in the castle will give us lodgings for the night?
It's a small dry room on the ground floor for me,
the gnome replied with a growl.
I've had my fill of water and heights this day.
Nothing but the best for a guard's returning great son.
The bard declared with a laugh.
I shall sleep in the Lord's own bed this night.